Okay.
People have access to it, so maybe somebody like something.
My husband couldn't bring the water right now. I remember how they were walking.
I need all the submissions next day.
I took like several steps.
No, it's not too late.
My husband did go to
There are a bunch of people sharing.
now I'm just using
Today, see, that's why.
actually
Today I was at the park with my kids.
because inside because when I was after walking outside, I was also trying to walk a little faster since I didn't want to that is the way I started. So I have really bad sensitivity to food. Yeah, and then I covered my face like this, and then I felt better. So the hair has to be more.
So it should be.
I know I must have flushed it.
Are you coming tomorrow?
Yeah, that's
No, I don't. Sorry. I'm sitting here next to them. From 10 to 1.
Hey.
Did you work today?
Yeah.
Is that lucky for doing this for us?
It's no. Should we start it? All right. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. So we're going to start reviewing what Sheikh Mustafa was going over for the midterm. We're going to start at chapter 1, and we'll go up till 5.3. If we have time, we'll go back to chapter 0, but I don't think we probably will. So you guys will have to review chapter 0 on your own. My goal is to mainly go over concepts. So I'm not going to do a lot of examples because I want to make sure you understand the concepts. If you understand the concepts, you'll be able to do the examples on your own. And so we'll go through concepts, and after each concept that I cover, I'll ask if you have any questions. If you do, we'll answer questions, and I'll try to throw in a few examples here and there. But it'll be very concept heavy. It won't be very many examples. A study guide was emailed out, and you probably saw the study guide was mostly blank. The reason being is we're going to fill it in together, and by writing out the points, it'll help you remember it and help you understand the concepts hopefully better. If you feel it's too much to write, the filled out version will also be posted after discussion. So if you just want to pay attention, you can do that too. Whatever is easiest for you. If you feel like I'm going too fast, just ask me to slow down and we can go over it again. I want to make sure that everyone's understanding what's going on. Okay, so let's get started. So the study guide is broken down into 3 parts: nouns, prepositions, and verbs. We mainly focused on nouns. Nouns, he gave us a lot of vocab. So all the noun vocabulary is at the top in this box. This is from all the 5 chapters, so make sure you know the vocabulary very well. Make sure you know the harakat, the vowel markings on top, because those will count if you don't know it. So know your vocab. So going on to nouns, there were a couple important concepts. The first concept in your study guide is nominal sentences. So a nominal sentence is a really complex way of saying a sentence that begins with a noun. Basically, it's a sentence that consists of two nouns, a subject and a predicate. And the word is implied when the two words join. The subject usually comes first, but that's not always the case, and the predicate comes after, but that's not always the case. The subject and the predicate must always match in gender. So if the subject is male, then the predicate must be male. If the subject is female, then the predicate must be female. Does that make sense? So for example, I wrote an example earlier. So we see this phrase, al-baytu kabirun. The phrase translates as the house is big. You'll see the house is the subject, which is al-baytu. The predicate is big. Is implied. Is nowhere written in Arabic. There's no way to say is in Arabic. It's always implied whenever you see two nouns coming together as a subject and predicate. So in English, whenever you see the word is, know that it's a sentence. So is equals a sentence. And when the sentence begins with a noun, it's a nominal sentence. And you have to look for the subject and you have to look for the predicate. Both of these are masculine, so they both match in gender. So if it was a feminine word, then, you know, like al-shamsu jamilatun, like the sun is beautiful. Sun is a feminine word. And so we have to add a ta to make it feminine to the adjective. And we'll go over that more in detail. So that's the concept of nominal sentences. Does everyone kind of understand what I went over, or did I go over it too fast? Make sense? Okay. For those that came late, the filled out version of the study guide will also be posted. So if you feel like just paying attention, you can, or you can take notes as you go. So the second concept that we went over was pronouns. Pronouns are very simple. It's very straightforward. Just like in English, they substitute a noun. There's multiple different pronouns. We've only covered two, so those are the two that I've included, huwa and hiya. There's no way to say it in Arabic, so it is implied with huwa and with hiya. So if it's a masculine word, the it would be huwa. If it's a feminine word, the it would be hiya. So he and it is huwa, and she and it is hiya. Make sense so far? So that's all you need to know in pronouns. So that's pretty easy. So far we've covered two big concepts and everyone seems to be following along. It's making sense so far, right? Okay, and we'll go over examples in a bit. The next concept that we covered was pointing words and a few other words. Pointing words are words that indicate like you know, where something is. So when you say there's hada, hadihi, dhalika, and tilka. Those four are pointing words. There's a male version and a female version. So when you say this, something's closer to you when you say this. Like even in English, when it's something that's close to you, that's when you use the word this. When something's further from you, you use the word that. Is everyone following? So that's when when something's further away from you, you use the word that. So there's a male way of saying it and there's a female way. When do you use the male? When you're talking about something masculine. You know how in Arabic there's feminine words and then there's masculine words. So when we're talking about something masculine, we'll use the male form. When we're talking about something feminine, we'll use the female form. For example, that boy is going to use which form? It's going to be that boy, right? So it will be dhalika, right? When I say that girl, it will be tilka. When I say this boy, it will be hada. When I say this girl, it will be hadihi. So that's the only difference. Otherwise, they're identical. Makes sense, right? And it's, again, it's what's close to you and what's far from you. It makes sense in English, but when in Arabic, for some reason, it sounds more confusing. But once you understand the English concept, the Arabic concept is the same way. And similarly, huna and hunaka also are used in relation to where it is to you. When something is closer to you, you use huna. When something is further, you use hunaka. So when I say this is here, it's close to me. When I say this is there, it's further from me. You understand that in English, right? So that's basically all you need to know. Just memorize the words and understand how to use them. So he's going to give you sentences in English, and you might have to translate them in Arabic. But now you've understood so many different concepts that you will be easily able to do that. Is everyone following so far? It's making sense? And then we'll go over examples at the end. The next concept we went over was definitive versus indefinitive. Now these sound like a lot of big words. What does definitive mean and what does indefinitive mean? I wrote out a chart so it's easier for you guys to remember. Definitive basically means when something has the word the before it. When a noun has the word the before it, like the book, the house, the cat, you know, anything with the before it is definitive. Anything without the is indefinitive. And anything that has the in it, it has an alif lam. So there's no separate word for the. There's an alif lam before the word. Does that make sense? So anytime you see an alif lam, you automatically know it's a definitive word, and you automatically know that it means the. Anytime a word has alif lam, it can never have tanween. Tanween is the double markings, the double vowel markings, like the double fathas, the double dhammas, the double kasras. It can never have double markings. So that's why I said without tanween. The other thing about something that's definitive is proper nouns are always definitive. And what is a proper noun? They're mainly like, it's a specific person, right? It could be a name. It could be like, for example, I wrote all the vocabulary that we learned for proper nouns. I put it underneath that. So you'll know all of those proper nouns. All the vocabulary in that box is all definitive. Is that making sense? And they don't have, for proper nouns, you don't have to put an L because it's already definitive. The is already implied, you know? So the first word in the box is Muhammadun. That's a proper noun, right? We know that. Like Allah, that's a proper noun. Musa is a proper noun. Nuh is a proper noun. Where it says Egypt, that's incorrect. It should be Fatima. So you guys can fix that on your notes. Sorry about that. Okay, we'll finish this and then we'll take a break for Isha. The last thing under definitive is alif in the L is skipped over when pronounced in the middle of speech. So if I wrote so the al-baytu, can you read my writing? The al-baytu is definitive because it has an alif lam. When it's in the middle of a speech, the was before it, the alif is skipped and you say wal baytu. That's just more of a pronunciation thing. It's not necessarily a rule that you'll need to remember. So that's basically, if you remember all of this, you know everything that you need to know about definitive and indefinitive. And so just memorize all the proper nouns, memorize the harakat, and know that either it can have an alif lam before it to make it definitive, or either it can be a proper noun. Those are the two things that make it definitive. Okay? And then we'll take a break for Isha, and then we'll come back and start nouns and adjectives, inshallah. So we'll take, we'll start again at, Isha's at 7:30? Okay. So maybe we'll finish now, we'll stop at 7:30 and take a break until 7:45, 15 minutes for Isha. Okay, so Isha's at 7:30, so we'll take a break at 7:30 then, and then we'll resume class at 7:45. Okay, so the next concept that we went over are nouns and adjectives, and this is a really important concept because there's a lot of rules that we need to remember for this. So adjectives, does everyone understand what adjectives are in English? Adjectives describe a noun in English. So a noun is a person, place, thing, or idea. So when the attributive adjective is describing the noun, for it to be an adjective of the noun, it has to match the noun in 4 things. We've learned what three of those things are. The first thing it must match the noun in is vowel markings. The vowel markings must be the same for the noun and the adjective. So if the ending vowel marking. So if the ending vowel marking is a fatha, then the adjective also has to have a fatha. If the ending vowel marking is a kasra, the adjective also has to have a kasra. If the ending vowel marking is a dhamma, then it also has to be a dhamma in the adjective. So the ending vowel marking must match. The second thing that must match is gender. So if the noun is male, then the adjective must be male. If the noun is female, then the adjective must be female. The third category that they must match in is either they must be both definitive or both indefinitive. And now you guys know what definitive and indefinitive mean, right? So either they both must, so let's say if I use the word, if I was saying the word, the adjective Muhammad, strong Muhammad, right? So Muhammad doesn't have an alif lam, but it's a proper noun. So the adjective, to make the adjective proper, you have to add an alif lam to it. And that's tricky because you don't see Muhammad to have an adjective. You don't see Muhammad to have an alif lam, and but you remember that it's definitive. So the adjective must have an alif lam to also be definitive. So either you can be definitive by being a proper noun or by having an alif lam. Adjectives can never be a proper noun. So to make an adjective proper, you have to have alif lam. So look for that. The fourth thing we didn't go over yet, so I won't explain that. And I have an example written out for a noun-adjective relationship. So I have 2 written out. So over here it says, al-baytu al-kabiru, the big house. You see both of them have the same vowel markings. Both of them are definitive, and both of them are masculine. So therefore, you know that this is a noun-adjective relationship. And it says the big house. Now, how would I make the big house into a sentence? And I would say the house is big. Remember, we went over nominal sentences, and we said that whenever you see is, it means a sentence. And if it begins with a noun, it's a nominal sentence. So if I go back to the previous example that we went over, and I see the house is big. But look when you see this in Arabic, it's very similar to the other one. The only difference is kabirun, it doesn't have an alif lam, and al-baytu does. And you automatically know that this cannot be, if you see this phrase in Arabic, you automatically know it cannot be a noun-adjective relationship. It must be a sentence because they don't match. They match, they're both male, and they both have the same, they both don't have the same ending vowel markings, but, and they both don't have they both aren't definitive. So it's a sentence. And so subtle differences change the meaning. That's why when you read the Quran, they care so much about every little detail because it transforms everything. Just not having the alif lam changes it from a sentence to a fragment. So the house is big is written like this, al-baytu kabirun. And over here, the big house is written as al-baytu al-kabiru. So that's a really important concept to remember. Now, what if I wanted to not say the big house? I wanted to say a big house. What would I do? I would take out the alif lam and say a baytun kabirun. Oh. Because they both have to match. So you can't, if the other one was the big house, then both of them have the alif lam. Sorry, I don't know how to. So is this making sense? Or is this too complicated? Making sense, right? Another thing to remember with nouns and adjectives, in English, I write a big house. The adjective comes first in English. In Arabic, it's the opposite. The adjective always comes last. So if I said the big, beautiful house, big would come last. Second to last would be beautiful. And house would be first. So it's the opposite. So over here, when you see in English, I wrote a big house. In Arabic, bayt is house, but that comes first. Big comes last. So it says house big, if you actually literally translate it in the order that it's translated. So that's another concept to remember, that in Arabic, it's reversed, the noun and the adjective. Okay, so the next thing so now that you understand how to identify if it's a noun versus an adjective, we learned the word jiddan. Jiddan is adding emphasis to any adjective. It just means very. Like if you say very big, very beautiful. Just like in English, it adds emphasis. It's always at the end. Not necessarily the end of the sentence, but the end of the noun-adjective relationship. And it never changes form. The vowel markings are always the same. It's always written the same way. So remember this word and remember exactly how to write it. The words that are written underneath it are all the adjectives that we went over from all 5 chapters. So if you memorize all of these, you'll know all your adjectives. And you'll know when to identify, and you'll know which one's an adjective versus a noun. Does anyone have any questions? No? It's making sense so far? Yeah.
Jiddan is with the kasra and the jeen.
Yeah, there's a kasra. You can write the kasra. Yeah, jiddan.
So how would you write a house is big?
House is big. You can't, that's not possible. No, that's not possible. That's a good question. Oops. All right, so let's go over the next concept and then we'll stop for salah. The next one are question words. So in Arabic, we learned how to make questions. So the question mark is usually not even needed in Arabic because whenever you see certain question words, you automatically know it implies a question. And it begins with that word. So when anytime like you say, what is that? You'll use ma. Man is for who. Hal is for is or are. The alif is for is or are as well. And the aina is for where. Now there's certain rules with it, like the ma is usually used for inanimate objects, ideas, and other life forms. The man is used for rational beings. So it wouldn't be used for animals. It would be used for like humans basically, or or jinn. Hal and the alif underneath it are basically interchangeable, but there's certain preferences on when hal can be used for ease of like pronunciation. Like it's better to use it when it's better to use hal when it's being followed by another word that begins with an alif, because it's just easier to pronounce it. Remember the rule when two sukuns are together. So a sukun on the hal changes to a kasra when it's followed by another sukun. He went over that a lot, so it's just for ease of pronunciation. The other thing that we went over were answers on how to answer yes or no questions. So yes or no questions are usually questions that begin with is or are. Like, is this your house? Is this my house? The beginning, just like in English, would be with a yes or a no. And so we learned how to say yes or no. So automatically in Arabic, you know, one trick to remember is if you see hal or if you see an alif in the question, automatically begin it with nam or la, because you know it's a yes or no question. And just sound it out when you translate it into English. You would begin with a yes or no anyways. So it's not really a trick, but it's something to, you know, make it easier for you guys. Is that making sense so far? Okay. Should we stop for Salah? Okay, and then we'll resume at 7:45. You want-
So, for a female that is away from you, that is still right?
Yeah.
And the male is
Then.
oh yeah.
I think because for me, I know 2 hours I want to write. Yeah, I write a lot. Well, I just figured we would get one, but I didn't want to. It's just standard for everybody. were working. Yeah. For sure. I don't know, some people want to be separate or like a mix. I don't know. Well, yeah. We can figure it out. I can put one in the table, we'll have to look at that. I just don't take enough time to do my homework, like, do it 3 times, like I say. Yeah, and have to write that homework. Yeah, exactly, the return. But like I have this desire to learn German for the longest time. I'm like, learning a language is usually well, and your normal class would go way slower. This is like, this super intense, but. Cause like, even the cheapest tutor would charge like $15 an hour. Yeah. And it's like for what, 200 or something? To get here for the intermediate level. Yeah. And this one's just like $50 for one class. So we did it for like 2, so it's really, really good. So, like, I didn't want so much technical school. So Arabic was like kind of the Arabic but I just never remember properly, like, for one incident or another, we had teachers changing and that. So like, always have to use it. Yeah. Does your family feel no, not for us. I grew up Christians, but we're not crazy about, yeah, so there's an idea of it. It's a good movie. It's a lot better than it used to be. Yeah. It just gets better with time. Yeah. Exactly. It's really good. Yeah, it's like, but they know they're not going to convince you out of it, and you're adamant about it. It's like right on top of their credit. Yeah. Well, at least the students aren't just the table. Yeah. So you leave the extra precedent. Well, I'm guessing you finished school? Yeah, I went to journalism school in North Carolina. But didn't really do anything with it. I completely understand. I minored in comms. Could kind of like trying to go on the city journalism route. But I enjoyed it. But yeah, it's like fun while you're in school, but then later like reality hits you and you're like, there's no job in your field. Yeah. All those liberal arts majors and like human sciences or pretty much. Yeah, I should have probably gone into like some sort of Was it all sisters here? I think there were a couple brothers. Just a couple. Go a little around this time. Yeah. Well, we can just keep a little distance. Yeah. Oh,
I'm on top 3.
I'm like, oh my goodness, let me call over there. It's like your first time. Oh,
Yeah, exactly. I was like, oh, I know this. And then I didn't go last week.
I was at home, I'm doing it the last day I did.
Okay. Yeah.
This is good.
And so, right?
Now you look more like a classroom.
Frustrated, I'm like, do this. But it was just me, I had a little cry.
Yeah, I saw that they sent the study guide, so I'm gonna.
Yeah, that's what we're going over.
Are there answers with the study guide?
She's going over it.
But do they provide the answers already?
No, you fill it in as we go through the.
I thought there was answers to the study guide already.
No, it's just notes.
Oh, just no.
It's just consolidating the rules.
Okay. Is it mostly only sisters?
Well, I don't know. They were a couple brothers. But everyone
Yeah,
was
most
kind of,
sisters.
but the brothers were kind of like in the.
Good night.
I don't know.
There's a couple here and one there.
I just had a meeting, but I just saw that the whole thing was shut off, and I was like,
Yeah, the carpets are wet. Mr. was telling me that they shampoo the carpet so you can run away.
we'll see where we're at. I'm not here for the meeting. I just flew back. I was in Arizona. I just see some air. Yeah, she said she's coming in a couple weeks in July. Yeah, we're like, we'll get together. Not gonna do it.
Oh, wait, there's been and I don't know what's big, but if that's a brother.
Okay, and then I was gonna skip it for today, and then I haven't heard confirmation. Okay, I'm not gonna do it, 'cause I need like a 24-hour notice usually.
Yeah, wait for a minute.
Yeah, if you haven't sent it, then I can.
Yeah.
Me do here.
Who do you have meeting with? It was not Mustafa, right?
No, O'Hara and Raymond. We have to do through.
Yeah, but right now,
I should have walked around.
they go to Starbucks and everything.
Yeah. They didn't do, oh, you don't. No, just you. No. And then just go agree to PR, I was like, I really want to want this, but. I'll see you guys later.
जब ये कर रही है स्क्रीन पे रुकेगी हाँ let me get the text then you know how much we know
I've like barely passed chapter 3.
huh
I'm on chapter 3 still for the homework.
no that's what I'm saying she's doing it look so easy but you spend a year in Vienna right my child te va a la guerra claro no ya como
Oh yeah. I can do that. Yeah. No, I always have one. I mean, I have like.
इनको भी यही करके काम करना था
All right. Assalamu alaikum. All right. So we were reviewing the study guide, and we just completed nouns and adjectives. Whatever you have missed, the filled-in version will be posted after the review session. Okay, so we went over nouns and adjectives and questions, and we're on how to make things feminine. We can go over examples. Yeah. After we finish everything, we'll go over examples. Okay, so let's get started. How to make things feminine. So we learned this in the later chapters, and we learned that every word in Arabic has a male, well, not every word, most words in Arabic have a male version and a female version. Some words are always male and some words are always female. Like an example of a word that's always male is boy. It can never be feminine. Or an example of a word that's always feminine is girl. To make things that can be, make things feminine, like for example, like the word small is sagir, right? To make it a feminine version, you would say sagiratun. So to make things feminine basically is you add a round ta to the end of the word to make it feminine. So for example, like kabir. This is masculine. When you want to make it feminine, you just add a ta to it, and now it's feminine. So that's essentially what it's saying. The reason it's important is when you learned noun and adjective relationships, or when you learned nominal sentences, you know in a nominal sentence, the subject and the predicate must match in gender. You also know in adjectives, you know, the noun-adjective relationship must match in gender. So therefore, it's important to understand how to make things feminine, right? Some words are feminine always and can never be masculine. Some words are understood, like woman, it's understood that it can never be, you know, masculine. Girl, it's understood. Other words are not understood. They're just feminine because it's what the Arabs said so in the language. And we just have to memorize that because sometimes it doesn't even have a ta and you wouldn't even know. Like the word sun, It's always feminine. You just have to know that. It doesn't have anything in the word to indicate that it's feminine, but it is, because that's what it was made to be when the language was established. Ard is always feminine, but there's no ta. Nar is always feminine. So remember this box. This is from your notes, pasted. Remember, these words are always feminine, regardless of whether they look like it or not, or whether it makes sense or not. Most of these, it makes sense, but some of them, you're like, oh, how is sun feminine? It is. It just is, you know? And so we have to remember that. So memorize this box and memorize what's feminine. Because if I say the sun is beautiful, beautiful has to be feminine, because sun is feminine. If I say the ground is big, or the ground is, you know, like if I'm describing ground, the adjective has to be feminine. If I'm saying the ground is big, I made it into a sentence. So the big has to be feminine, or big ground. So just remember that it's very important to know that because of that reason. Now it gets a little complicated, because this is stuff that he went over a little fast, and it was like in chapter 4 and 5 when we went over, we finished nouns, and so now we've completed the section of nouns. We'll go over examples of everything if time permits. But this topic was a little confusing, and it was kind of in the little bullet points and footnotes underneath, and it was prepositions. So just like in English, when there's prepositions in Arabic. Prepositions are like in, of, you know, those type of words, like to, they're all prepositions. And there's certain special prepositions that change the vowel marking on a noun only. They don't change it on a verb, only on a noun. So if you have to remember that if you see a certain preposition and another noun follows it, then you have to remember that it'll change the vowel marking. So the first box talks about words that cause the noun after it to end with a kasra, or a kasra with a tanween, which is basically a double kasra. We've only learned 3, but there's a lot more. So I've only put the 3 that we've learned, and these are the only ones that you're responsible for. So if you said he's going to the market, market would have a kasra on it, because you use this word to before it. If you're saying I'm on top of like a mountain, mountain would have a kasra on it. I'm inside the house, or in a house. The word house would have a kasra on it. So just remember, anytime these prepositions, these 3 special prepositions precede a noun, the noun will have a kasra or a double kasra on it, depending on what the rule is, depending on whether it's definite or indefinite. Are you guys following me so far? So this is something he went over fast. Another thing that he also taught us was min. Not men, but min. Remember, man was a question word. The only difference is it has a fatha on top of the meme. So this one, on top, under the meme is a kasra. So it changes the word completely. Again, this is why we need to, when we read Arabic, the markings matter. And it's important to understand. Later on, you'll recognize when min is being used versus man, because you'll understand when it makes sense to say who versus when it makes sense to say from. And that's why even if they won't have the markings, you'll know how to pronounce it. But it's very important you know the markings right now and you write with the markings. So anytime min precedes a noun, only a noun, not a verb. If it precedes a verb, it doesn't change it. But if it precedes a noun, it changes the ending marking to a fatha or a fathatain. So let's go over some examples. So, for example, when we say bil, bait, what's the ending sound? T, right? It'll have 1 kasra. Again, why doesn't it have 2 kasras? Because it's definite. It has a alif lam. And it wouldn't be tu or ta. It'll automatically be ti. What if you say, some of it, okay, it just might not make sense. I'm going to the house, okay? And you say to the house. This means in the house. This is, sorry, to the house or towards the house. What marking would the ta have? What? Again, a kasra. It wouldn't have a fatha, it wouldn't have a dhamma because of this word. So that's what the word does, that's all. Nothing more complex than that. What was the next one that you guys were talking? Ala. He's on the mountain. Jabal. Jabal li. It would be a kasra because of this word. Does that make sense? Very easy. That's it. Nothing more to that concept. But it seemed so hard when we were learning it because it was he casually mentioned it, right? So min does the same thing. Again, there's more of these, but you've only learned a few, so I'm only putting the few that you're responsible for. As you go along, there will be more, and we'll teach you more. So for min, remember it's not men, it's min. Min means what? It means from, right? So what can we say?
Medina.
Now it's a little complicated when you use places, and I'll explain that later. Well, let's just use baits, okay? It's from the house. I know it's not the best sentence, best, fragment in the world, but it'll be ta because of this word. And that's all you need to understand about these prepositions, is they change the ending marking, the ending vowel sound. And these rules are important because eventually you'll be reading without vowel markings, and you'll have to know how to make it sound, like how it sounds. And the only way to know that is if you understand the rules. So far following? Super easy. We've almost covered everything you need to know.
So with min, without al, it will be by tan, right?
Exactly. So if there was no al, that's a good question. So if it was min, so it would be the two kasras. Oh, sorry. Good job, you guys are paying attention. So min beitan. Okay?
When does the min changes into minel? I thought it changes to minel. Like when it says verses.
This over here. So over here, it would change. It would change to a fatha for ease of pronunciation.
So technically, you would have to write the phrase from the house.
Yeah, you could write it either way, but for ease of pronunciation, the sukoon changes into a fatha because technically you would say minal bayta. You wouldn't say, you can't say it any other way. So for ease of pronunciation, the sukoon changes into a fatha, just like it does with hal. But you can write it both ways for the test. It's more for ease of pronunciation. But in a lot of scripts, you'll see it written with a fatha, and now you know why. And if you write it with a fatha, it is better, but you don't have to. But you can't say it any other way. If you try pronouncing it, it's impossible.
Question.
Yeah.
Are you allowed to write two fathas like that on the test?
No. You probably want to write it this way. We're not grading my handwriting right now. Okay. So over here, the next thing is Now that you learned that there's certain prepositions that change the noun after it, there's actually exceptions to the rule. So it gets even more complicated. There's certain things that never change. There's certain things that kind of change, and certain things that do change. And so things that do not change, you don't have to know the Arabic name, but in this chart, it's under do not change. It's called mabni, basically, but you don't need to know what it's called. So min hada is written. Min is something that causes the noun after it to change, but hada will never change. It'll always remain hada. Like the markings on it will never change. Fi hunaka. It's hunaka. It's not hunaki. Hunaka is a word that never changes, so you'll just have to memorize that. You have to memorize which words never change. There's no shortcut to it. Musa. Also, it'll never change, even if there's a special word before it. And Musa is a noun, hunaka is a noun, hada is a noun, but it still doesn't change. In general, things when they end with the alif maksura, which is it looks like a ya, but it has no dots, it does not change. That's in general the rule. So that's one shortcut that you can remember, that Musa, because it has that, it cannot change. But the other ones you kind of just have to memorize. So those are the three he expected you to remember. A fourth one I'll add is jiddan. We already kind of went over that. Jiddan also doesn't change, regardless of what precedes it. It stays what it is. Now there's a middle category that only, like when there's a special word in front of it, it can either change to a fatha or a dhamma, but it can never have a kasra. This middle category can never have a kasra. So, min Maryama, but it can never be fi Makkata, it can never be Makkati. So it always changes, it takes a fatha, but it cannot take a kasra. It can take it can be Makkatu, but it can never be Makkati. So in general, places, that's why when you mentioned places, in general, one shortcut is places are usually never take a kasra. In general, that's the general rule. And also know that proper nouns like Adam and Maryam not all proper nouns follow the same category. So that's why it's important to remember how proper nouns, all the markings on the proper nouns, because some proper nouns can change all the way. They can have a kasra, but some of them can't. And so you just need to remember this table. For now, he just expects you to remember three things. I gave you a couple of shortcuts, but in general, you just have to remember which words can halfway change, which words do not take a kasra. So if you write fi Makkati, it would be wrong. Even though you know the rule and you're trying to, it would be incorrect because you cannot say that. So that's kind of tricky, but you have to remember. The last column is something you already know, which is, it does change and it takes the kasra. Or it becomes whatever it needs to be. Okay, verbs. Okay, so for verbs, we learned verbs in chapter 5. So this is the newest concept, so we're gonna spend a little bit more time on it. Verbs are very different than nouns. Verbs have a tense, and that's the biggest difference. So a verb can be in the past tense, it can be in the present tense, or it can be in the future tense. Okay, so he found something. I'm going to find something. You know, when we use words in English, it's different. It changes in tense. And so that's the biggest difference. Verbs also indicate an action. Certain verbs have a specific preposition that follows it, and you have to memorize what preposition comes with that verb. So it can only have it usually follows with a special preposition, and that's so when not only do you have to memorize the verb, but you have to memorize the preposition that it comes with. So dhahaba always comes with ila. So dhahaba ila, and ila means to, which makes sense. I'm going to the market. I'm going to my house. I'm going to this place. I'm going to that place. So you always say dhahaba ila or dhahabat ila. You know, dhahabat ila al-bayti. And you just made a, you made a verbal sentence. Kharaja always comes with min. What does min mean? From. He exited from the door. So it always comes with min. So you have to remember which preposition it comes with. Yeah.
So if you have a proper noun in a sentence, where does that go in the word?
It depends what type of sentence you're writing. If you're writing a verbal sentence or a nominal sentence.
So like if you have one of these that has a preposition with it automatically, then do you then put the subject after those two words, or does it go in between?
So if you're writing a verbal sentence always begins with the verb. So you'll say the verb first, and then you'll say everything else after it. And you'll say the preposition directly after that verb. So there's no in between. So this comes right after that. Good question. So another thing to remember is verbs follow a certain pattern. There's, just like any language, verbs are conjugated, meaning they change forms based on what tense it's in, if it's he, she, they, them. So you're going to learn the patterns of verbs. Right now, all the verbs above imply the pronoun he or it. So verbs have a pronoun embedded in it based on the pattern. And so raja'a means he returns, or he comes back. It's past tense, and it implies he. So dakhala, he entered. It means it's a past tense. Khalaqa, he created. All the verbs change based on if they're singular or plural. All these are singular. So it's talking about, and you'll learn that later. And all these verbs become feminine by adding open ta with a sukoon on top of it. So the first one would be raja'at. The second one would be wajadat. The third one would be kharajat. The fourth one, sami'at. Dhahabat would be the feminine version. Dakhalat, jalasat, khalaqat. So does that make sense? No, it's an open ta. Ta maftuha. Okay, jalasat. It means she sat. Only one girl sat, not so and he'll explain how to say multiple people sat. But this is only she sat, not they sat, not both of the girls sat. It's just one girl sat. Jalasat.
So that in itself is a sentence.
Not quite, but we'll explain that more. So this is she sat. Okay? What does this mean?
He said.
Exactly. It means he sat. In general, I don't know if the pattern that they follow for singular past tense verbs is there's always a fatha on the first letter and there's always a fatha on the last letter. But I don't know if you need to know that. All feminine, to make any singular feminine verb, you always add a ta with a sukoon on top. Is it making sense so far? Okay. So this kind of concludes where he left off. So we can go over more examples on the different sentences. So does anyone have any questions? Yes.
You said that these will be available online.
Yeah. Filled out. Yeah, the filled one will be available online. So does anyone have any questions, or should I fill? Yeah.
Repeat the first part, the first part became late.
I wouldn't be able to go back and repeat that, but I'll be able to go over examples, and everything will be available online.
On 4.2, can you write it, example 2 and 5? Example 2 says,
Okay, so we're doing, you said 4.2. Example what?
2 and 5.
Example 2 and 5. Okay, you have to read it to me.
It says the earth is large.
The earth is large. Okay, so what is this? Is this a nominal sentence or verbal sentence? Nominal sentence, right? Because it has two nouns, a subject and a predicate. Earth is the subject, large is the predicate. Couple things to remember, they both must match in gender, right? The subject usually comes before the predicate unless there's some other rules that cause it not to. So the way we'll write it is we'll write the earth makes earth definitive because it has a the. So how do you say the word earth? Ard, right? And to make it definitive, you would say al-ard. And how do you say large? Good. Is earth masculine or feminine? Is it feminine or masculine? Okay, so what would be the large? Exactly. So it would also be feminine. And both of them have to match in marking. So if one is 2, then the other one.
Sorry, it's still writing that.
Okay, so, okay. So, oh, you were asking about how to write it, right?
Yeah, what is that? Because they both had like this, definite circle.
Oh, I see what you're saying. So so one thing, do you guys know this, what this is?
Yeah.
It's a lam and then an alif. And then another way to write it is lam and alif. So that's kind of how you would use it. When you would add, when a word starts with an alif, and you want to add an L to it, you would, how would it work? Would it be become like this. Does that make sense? So that's how you would write it. Good question. Exactly. What's the next question?
It's the same thing, the other one would say like the sign is waiting.
Okay, so you get how to write it now.
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. For which? So to make anything feminine, it's always with the ta marbuta. Kabira tun. It's with the ta marbuta.
Al-ardu kabiratun.
Al-ardu kabiratun. And it wouldn't be al-ardun because al makes it lose its tanween. Yes.
How would we say the bigger?
Bigger, we haven't learned that yet. That's a superlative. We haven't gone into superlatives yet.
But then we just did like 2 words with our, what was that? Like, if we did do something that says al-ardu kabiratu, the big house.
The big house? Okay. So we went the big house. Al-baytu al-kabiru. If you want to say the house is big, it's a sentence. Al-baytu kabirun. Remember, if we add an alif lam to kabirun, it would be al-kabiru, and it would change it to a noun adjective relationship, and it would be the big house. Making sense so far? Yes.
Just to quickly get this, the word for water, ma.
Uh-huh.
So you never like al-ma, ma'u, right? There is no the water, or there is the water, but not ma'un.
You can. I don't know. I don't know what you said.
Like, do you say, do you do indefinitive for al-ma? Ma'un?
Uh-huh.
You can?
Yeah?
Oh, okay. Okay, I thought it was only one.
No, you can. Okay. Anyone else have questions before we go over examples? Yes?
So what's like the easiest to know like the different in English? So you said the subject or the adjective comes in Arabic. The adjective comes before the subject. Is that what it was? Or
So, okay.
So
So in Arabic, in English, we say a big house. Big comes first. So in English, the adjective comes first. In Arabic, the adjective comes last.
So, like, if the sentence was the tall new house.
Okay, so let's do that. The tall new house. Okay, so now there's 2 adjectives. Now what do we do? Which order do we write it in? So in Arabic, the adjective comes last, right? So if this is a noun adjective relationship, the house would be number 1 and big would come next. So you do the numbering the same. House is number 1, new is number 2, and tall is number 3. So it's just backwards. So house would come first, then new, then tall. So if you keep adding adjectives, you keep the order the same. It's exactly reversed.
And everything will have out in there, right? In this sentence?
Exactly. Because there's no is, therefore it's not a sentence, it's just a fragment, and it's a noun-adjective relationship. So all of them would have the al, because this has an al. Yes?
If ad-dunya is subject, then how would you write it with dhamma?
Oh, you're saying can it be feminine?
Yeah, I mean, wouldn't it be like with the in? The subject always.
I'll answer your question afterwards
Okay.
because I don't fully get it, so I'll answer it afterwards, inshallah. Anyone else? Okay, so let's open up examples. So what we're going to do is go over all the examples he went through from chapter 1 through chapter 5. So let me open it up. Just give me a... Okay, so let's start from chapter 5 and work our way backwards.
Yeah, thank
Okay, so chapter 5, we only went over 3 examples. So we're going to go over these 3 examples. So I want you guys all to cover up the Arabic. So if you open up to chapter 5, I want you to cover up the Arabic. And I want you to write the answer is going to be up here, but without looking at the answer, I want you to write Muhammad sat down. Without looking at the Arabic, write it down as a verbal sentence. Verbal sentences begin with the verb. And then we'll explain the example. So take a moment and write down, cover up the Arabic and write down it in Arabic. Okay, so the word for sat is jalasa. So sat down is jalasa. Who sat down? Muhammad. So all we need to do is we put the verb first. So anytime you see a verb, it's preferred to make a verbal sentence. So just remember that. If he's giving you English sentences that you have to translate, if you see a verb in there, just know I'm writing the verb first in Arabic. So you write the verb first. Then you already know the verb for, you can't write jalasat. You can only write jalasa. Those are the only 2 forms you know. You know Muhammad has to be masculine, so therefore you should use jalasa. You shouldn't use jalasat. Muhammad is singular, therefore you should use jalasa. You know? It's not 2 Muhammads, it's 1. Or it's not a group of Muhammads, it's just 1. So you say jalasa Muhammadun. So that's really easy. Did it make sense to everyone? So that's the only thing you needed to know how to do for that example. So let's do the next one. Cover up the Arabic and write down, for English, write down Maryam entered the mosque. Okay. So first thing we see is a verb. If we look at the English, we know entered is a verb. Maryam and the mosque are nouns. Anytime we see a verb, it's preferred we make it into a verbal sentence. Even though I can make it into a nominal sentence, the preferred way is a verbal sentence, if there's a verb present. So you put the verb in the front, automatically. Is Maryam masculine or feminine?
Dakhalat doesn't have a time marbuta. You said it's always time marbuta.
That's for nouns. For verbs, the rules are different. So to make an adjective feminine, you add a ta marbuta. That's a great question. And it's always a ta marbuta because it's a noun. Nouns and adjectives. They all fall into the same category. But verbs are a whole different, we forget what we learned about nouns and we go to verbs. The rules are totally different. So jala, so we use, we know the word to enter is dakhala, but dakhala is he entered. So you want to say she entered, right? Because we're talking about Maryam. We're not talking about a boy, we're talking about a girl. And it's just one girl, so we say dakhalat. So we just made it feminine by adding a ta. Who entered? Maryam entered. Right? So then you begin the order of the rest of the sentence. So Maryamu al-masjida.
Can I use the best time?
Huh?
She entered the masjid with the
He didn't teach you that yet. He didn't teach you why it's a fatha. I can explain it, but you don't need to know that. Did he teach you that already? He did? He did? Okay. So just exactly what you said. In a verbal sentence is made up of 3 parts. The doer, the done to, and the verb, basically. If it's describing, you know, like basically the masjid is what's affected, right? By the she entered the masjid. You know, it's where did she enter? The action is being done upon that. So therefore, it has a fatha. But I don't know if he's taught you that. He did? He did? Okay, so then a lot of people are saying he did. So just know that, but no, he'll be easy on you because we didn't cover verbs heavily. So he'll go over that more. So he won't test you heavily on verbs.
Sorry, why is it like,
because that's the rule. So to make anything feminine, you add a ta with a sukoon. It's just always with the sukoon. It doesn't ever change. Huh?
I thought it was like fatha.
No. To make a singular feminine verb, it's always a ta with a sukoon.
You don't have to write sukoon in the test, right?
You do have to write sukoon on the test for this particular thing because it's significant. For now, you do. For now, write every single sukoon, every single fatha. Later on, when your Arabic is very polished and you already know all the rules, then you can omit and make shortcuts. For now, write every little thing. Okay, so let's go over the third one. Now that it gets a little complicated because certain things that we learned are being applied. So within a verbal sentence, there can be nouns. And those same rules that we learned for nouns do apply. So let's do the third one. Cover up the Arabic and write the Arabic yourselves. So the sentence is, she went to the city and found Muhammad. So I would underline all the verbs first. And then remember, an and breaks up the sentence into 2 parts. So I would deal with one part before the and I would deal with the part after the and. And I would treat that as 2 separate verbal sentences. And I would begin that way. That's kind of my hint. So you underline all the verbs you see. When it's a verbal sentence, the first thing you're going to do is put the verb in front. So the verb for went is what? Dhahaba. Who went? She went. So it's it's a female. So you would say dhahabat with a ta. You don't have to write the word she. You don't have to write hiya. Do you see a hiya here? No. You don't see the hiya. If I said hiya dhahabat, it would make it a nominal sentence because it would begin with a noun. We don't want to do that. We want to make it a verbal sentence. So to make it a verbal sentence, it begins with the verb, and the pronoun is implied with verbs. So that's why it's she went is translated into dhahabat. Remember how I told you dhahaba always comes with a certain preposition? Ila. We already were supposed to know that. So that's why automatically we put ila there. And it's part of the sentence. She went to, where did she go? To the city. Now, why is it Madinati? Exactly. Because of ila, Medina is a noun. Ila comes before it. It makes the vowel marking on the ta a kasra. Does that make sense? So you did the first part of the sentence. Now there's an and. The and, just treat it like another sentence begins. So you say and, found Muhammad. Found is the verb, so we put that first. Muhammad is masculine, so we choose the male form.
But she found her.
Oh, she found him. Good. Sorry, I said that wrong. I apologize. So So she's doing the action, not Muhammad. Muhammad, exactly. Muhammad is the object of the action. Muhammad is affected by the verb, basically. Is that making sense? No? Yeah? So Muhammad is being affected by the verb. So because it's affected by the verb, it has a fatha. Remember, we learned that in the proper noun section, we learned Muhammadun. We learned that it takes two markings at the end of it, not one, but two. So because now those two markings change into a fatha, you put two fathas on top. Remember the rule that two fathas at the end of a word can never be on its own. You can never write it on top of the dal. You always have to add a stool for I say like a stool or a chair for it to sit on. And that chair is the alif. So the alif is never pronounced. It's there just to be for, because the fatha needs the two fathas need a chair to sit on. If it was just one fatha, you would put it on top of the dal. But because it's two fathas, it needs some place to go, and because it's too heavy, so it just remember that. I don't know how you want to remember it, but that's the rule. That's how you write it. Yeah.
Can you explain why are we doing two fathas instead of two dhammas? Muhammad.
Exactly. It's the same reason why it's al-masjida instead of al-masjidu. Because the verb is being affected by that. She found who? She found Muhammad. She entered what? She entered the mosque. So the verb is the thing that the verb is affected by, without making it too complex. I'm trying to use vocabulary so it's like easy for you to understand. But if I'm losing you, then I can make it more complex too. It's anytime you look at the verb and you see what's being affected by the verb. So entered, where is she entering? The mosque. Who is she finding? Muhammad. Or what is she finding? Whatever answers the question of who or what or where, that answer to that is a fatha, always, or a two fathas, depending on the rule.
So proper nouns do change sometimes.
Proper nouns, yeah.
Like, proper names, sorry.
Yeah, for sure. Only those boxes, only those specific words. Remember that I told you about? Let's go to Okay, so where's Muhammad? The ones, okay, the proper nouns that are written that do not change, Musa is one of them. And I told you a shortcut for that. Usually anything that ends with the alif maksura doesn't ever change. So you just have to remember what they are. Maryam ma or Maryamu. It can never be Maryami. So Maryam can halfway change, but it can never take a kasra. Same with Adam. It can never take a kasra. So you just have to remember these. It can take a fatha or it can take a dhamma. So it can still take a fatha. So it can partially change. It can't fully change. So these are partial. The middle is partially changing. This row it changes. It does not change, and this one it changes completely. So let's go back to the examples. Okay, so does anyone else have any questions about the 3 examples he went over for chapter 5? Because that was the last chapter he went over, and it was kind of confusing. Yeah?
For example, the 5.3, number 3, Muhammad entered the garden. How would you say that?
Muhammad entered the what? Okay, the same way. So Maryam entered the mosque. So Muhammad entered the garden. Is that what you're saying, right?
Yes.
So you would start with dakhala. Because it's exactly Muhammadun entered the garden. So a garden, a garden. So garden.
There's a special thing.
What do you mean? Garden is feminine.
Yeah.
It's always feminine. So there's nothing that changes.
And I'm saying the vowel at the end. What would it be?
It would be a fatha.
Okay.
Yeah, because it's being affected by the verb. So where did she enter? It answers the question like who, what, where. So that one always takes a fatha or the 2 fatha markings.
This one takes 2 Jonathan, 1
Is it definitive or indefinitive?
Jonathan.
So it depends. If it's definitive, it takes and it has a garden, then it would take a tanween. Okay. Does anyone else have any questions about these examples? Okay.
Are we talking Dakhala Muhammadan Jannatan?
Okay, so let's write it down. Sorry for my writing. It's not. Dakhala. So it would be dakhala instead of dakhalat. And then Muhammadun.
So why done now?
Why done?
Why not done?
Why not done?
Because we just did that. What is that Muhammadan, right?
Uh-huh.
So what caused it to be 2 fathahs and what's causing it to be 2 dhammas?
Great question. Because Muhammad is the subject in this sentence. Maryam entered the mosque, right? So we're saying Muhammad entered the mosque, for example. Maryam over here, why is it Maryamu and why is it not Maryama? Because Maryam is the subject. So the subject is not affected by the verb.
So the object.
Exactly. So it's Maryamu, and these last markings make a big difference because if you see the Arabic, you'll know what's the subject of the sentence. You know what's being affected by the verb. That's why these markings are kind of important too when you're reading the Arabic. And it changes everything if you, that's why when you're reading the markings and you read it wrong, it changes the meaning completely of the whole thing. Those ending markings mean a lot. Because that one marking, if I said al-masjidu, it would throw everything off. And it would mean something completely different. Any other questions?
We didn't finish that line that you were writing.
Oh, yes. I'm sorry. دخل محمد.
I think it was Jannat.
Oh, now we're saying Muhammad entered the masjid. You want to say a masjid?
Yeah.
Okay, we'll do this one first since I wrote it. So Muhammad entered the masjid. If it's a masjid, I would just take this off, and then I would put 2. I would take this off. I would add an alif, and I would put 2.
Because it's a dash.
No, because it's a 2 fathas.
So, yeah.
2 fathas can never go, always need a special thing to sit on. Why? I don't know.
But in that word Jonathan, you just put the tanween on top of the tamabuta, not the aleph and the ta.
Exactly. It can sit on top of a ta marbuta. That's a great point. It can sit on top of a ta marbuta, but it cannot, or it can sit on top of an alif.
Oh, so you can write after the ta marbuta another
Yes.
alif and
You can write yeah, you can write it like that.
but there is no alif there.
There's no alif. But it works for a ta marbuta and it works for an alif. Those are the only 2 times.
So if spelling has ta instead of a ta marbuta, you have to write an alif
Yes.
at the end.
Yes.
You have to write,
So if it has,
like
let's
ayat,
say
ayat.
it ends in this type of ta,
Okay.
you add an alif.
Okay.
And it's only the circle ta, you know?
Like what it was.
Huh?
Like kitab.
Yeah, exactly. Yes.
So what's the difference from like when we do open tab or the closed tab? So like we use the haba,
Uh-huh.
since we change it into feminine, like does it matter which one we do like they're different roles? Because this one is open. tab.
Yeah, so the open ta is with the ending of verbs are with the open ta. You'll never, uh-oh. Batteries are 20. Okay, we'll figure it out when it dies. The open ta is only for verbs. The end of the verbs is an open ta. But to make adjectives feminine, it's a round ta, the ta marbuta. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay, so any more questions about chapter 5 sentences?
Yeah. 5.3.
Okay. Okay, so Khadija found the prophet. Okay, so now, is there a verb in this sentence? Found is the verb. So automatically verbal sentences are preferred, so we will make this a verbal sentence. Now that we're making it a verbal sentence, the order is it must start with the verb. So we'll say found first, right? So this will be number 1. Oh. Okay, so wajah. Now, why did you say wajadat? Exactly. It's a female, so you made it female. Wajadat. The next thing in a verbal sentence is always the subject. which is Khadija.
Khadija too.
So Khadija. And then the next thing is the thing that's being affected by the verb, which is prophet. So it's definitive. So prophet, you say Rasul, right? Is that the word? Okay, so what did he teach you for prophet? Nabi? Okay, so Nabi, you have to add an L in front of it. So it will be El Nabi, and the ending marking will be a fatha, and it will be only one because it's definitive. Nabiya.
And for Khadija,
Khadijatun. Can it, what's the proper noun? Let's go to the proper noun. Anytime you forget, go back. Let's go to the proper noun. How does Khadija, is it tu or is it tun in this box? It's written as tu. It's not written as tun, so that means it can only come with one vowel marking. So what I said was incorrect. So it's Khadija tu. Because I forget to. So we have to go back and make sure we remember the markings. Okay.
So what would be the end?
What would be the what?
The end sentence? What are the
Nabi, what's the ending though?
Nabi.
So Nabi has to have an L because it's definitive, right? So El Nabi, yeah.
So it could be I tried.
No, you'll put like a fatha.
But wouldn't you connect the pizza, the tail of Mustafa and Nabi?
No, Khatija is already feminine. You don't need to, yeah, it's already feminine.
I mean, don't you get rid of the lamb?
You still write it, but you don't pronounce it.
Right.
Exactly. So there's 14 letters that are special letters. Remember, he went over this in chapter 0. There's 14 letters that are special letters where you would add a shadda to them. Like the example he gave. So there's 14 letters. So, for example, this is the example he gave. Rajul, right? Would become, when you add an alif lam, it would become with a shadda, rajul. So this is, the ra is one of those special 14 letters. So rajul, and then rajul. Oh no.